In my last video, the big thesis was that Finn, and the show itself, are growing up. The whole time I was approaching it as though everyone agreed with me that this angle the show took was improvements through and through. But it has come to the forefront that Season 6 of Adventure Time ends up being the most divisive in the show's tenure. All those previous elements, serialization, nuance, introspective, and philosophical storytelling, are even more heightened than before, and yet many episodes maintain the episodic, classic escapades that Adventure Time was known for. As someone whose appreciation for the show deepened when this season was first airing, I was curious if this derision was purely maudling 4chaners, or is there some merit to the criticism? Key element to understanding the reception of this season is to understand why the show is different, and to look at its contemporaries in the animation world at the time. The entire culture was under a massive renaissance, with multiple programs airing plot-driven shows to massive audiences of young adults. You see, kids' animation was no longer catering to little stinky poo-poo babies and snot-nosed children. Subtly, an audience of teens and college students were able to grow around the airing shows due to them acknowledging that these shows were not as simple as one may think children's programming to be. Similarly stated last video, Adventure Time and animation at this time were evolving alongside the growing internet and social medias. This allowed creatives to see what the viewers thought of the episodes as they were airing. It may have been a case of this audience having always been there, but only now through online forums could they be seen and acknowledge what the tastes were. These posts would be filled with shipping, theory posting, and discussions about the plot and characters. The interest was there because the shows were no longer interested in simple childlike lessons that the cartoons of the 80s and 90s were all too eager to use to wrap up an episode in a neat little bow. There was no longer this patronizing feeling to watching animated programs. The audience knew the cliches, and the creatives knew that they knew. It was no longer interesting to make things that were safe and recognizable. Why end the episode with a cliche lesson learned, and instead have elements in the story that introduce nuance and let the audience chew on that for a week? The writing process itself would also take the form of fun exercises and personal anecdotes to spice up what would and wouldn't make it into an episode. The whole team would even host these off-site meetups for the writers to play games and reinvigorate their juices. Only a select small amount of ideas come from these off-sites, but it is still emblematic of what the process for the show was like. Maybe someone comes up with a one-off idea or expands on something else someone pitched a while ago. But the best, juiciest ideas came from the crew, just shooting the breeze, getting lunch, the quick bouncing of ideas in the hallway, or just hanging out on couches. All the usual suspects still contribute a lion's share of ideas. Penn, Pat, Ken, Jesse, Tom, Steve. We could be listing creatives all day. There's not really guidelines. They like to keep reoccurring mainstay stories per season, with every individual character getting a specific episode to shine within the run of a season. Maintaining the feel of the show is the biggest goal. The biggest driving force behind such a unified vision for the show was the culture surrounding it. Everyone's efforts create a unified body that holds its own shape together as much as it outlines how a story can be approached. These writers' games and lackadaisical process can make the writing seem more fun and whimsical than it really is. But the truth of the matter is that all these creatives were thinking about the show all the time. The initial insight of the show was almost as cliche as any story can get. A boy and his dog fighting evil wizards to save a princess. But 6 seasons in, and now they have managed to infuse so many layers of depth to the characters and world, that now they were really able to play around with what they feel were the limits of an Adventure Time story and what is not. This is especially the case in Season 6. Instead of a heroic moral quandary, why not have the characters examine the human condition and the circumstances of their life? Beyond that, they wanted the feelings within the story to feel real. Often the crew would draw from their own deep, honest perceptions of the world to give a first-hand account of a lived experience told through the lens of an Adventure Time world. Sometimes you can just feel an individual episode came from a creative that has something they wanted to say. Does it always work? No, but you never get the feeling that an episode feels out of place. As a result of this, the show has a ton of sincerity and heart. These characters feel as though they are having real moments between one another. Not in a sitcom-y lesson at the end of the episode sort of way, but in a real human conversation sort of way. And that approach to storytelling means you are not only going to get heartwarming bonding moments, but also moments of messiness. Which, Season 6 is by far the messiest season within the show's tenure, but also contains the show's most serialized season-spanning story. From the first to the last, the season follows an introspective journey for many of the characters, but in the forefront is Finn, whom the show takes into low valleys and makes controversial decisions to examine who all these characters truly are and how they see themselves in the grand scope of the universe. Often the discourse surrounding the season lacks the nuance that the show imbues itself with in this stretch. As a result, there is a lack of comprehension when decisions are made that may paint one character or another in certain negative lights. Despite the simple childlike paint, the stories and characters are no longer black and white, good and evil. It is time to take a look inward and dive into what the 6th season of Adventure Time is truly about. It's about depression. No wait, there's a healthy dose of Gnosticism in there. Oh, actually, it's about this one part of the Campbell's hero journey where the main character meets a higher power. Come on, it's just following the trend of other cartoons at the time and being serialized. Is it too gauche to say it's still about growing up? Yeah, truly, it's about all that stuff. And still, it maintains all those Adventure Time sensibilities too. It was the main theme in the last video, so we won't harp on it too much, but the thesis driving the story direction can almost always be traced back to the show aging up alongside the main character. And evidently the show is taking the audience down into the depths of a depressive episode with the events surrounding Finn at the start of the season. The season opening two-parter was on par with the highest the viewership of the show had ever been, which before was the season 5 opening. Not only that, the audience ratings places this two-parter as the apex of the show's tenure, only being beaten by a select few episodes. The two-parter, Wake Up and Escape from the Citadel, follow the current pattern of season ends and starts for the show. Last time it was a character-focused odyssey, so now this time it's a harrowing, action-packed adventure. The episodes are a masterclass in setup and payoff, combining many individual threads to make one thrilling and satisfying climax that also smartly sets up the journey that the following season will explore. Picking up immediately after the lingering thread at the end of season 5, Finn is pondering the revelation that his bio-human dad is still alive. Jake, having just returned from a party at Prismo's, suggests asking him for more info. After a little jovial action sequence, the plot to get Finn to meet his father emerges. Prismo is going to let Finn and Jake wake up his corporeal body. You see, the act of waking up and killing a Wishmaster is considered a cosmic crime, and will take the duo to the Citadel where Finn's father is. However, the Lich, who has been stuck in Prismo's time cube since the last multiversal plot, also wakes up to kill Prismo, hijacking Finn and Jake's trip. Unlike the last climactic Lich confrontation, this one stays in their own universe. This doesn't mean the story isn't grand in scope, however, as the Citadel itself is a crystalline structure floating in space with alien vein-like crystal overlords who maintain the prison. The Lich gets chained up in a cosmic crystal, which gives Finn and Jake time to look for Finn's father. To Finn's dismay, his dad is bald. Oh, and he's one of the prisoners. The Lich melts his own crystal, which sends the Citadel into dismay, which gives the other prisoners the opportunity to escape. In the process, Finn breaks out his dad, which illuminates what kind of person his dad is. Preferring Finn to call him Martin instead of Dad, he reveals himself as a supremely avoidant and selfish person. He pulls every manipulative trick he can to find a way to escape.
Smooth like new. Couldn't fix the boot too, huh?
Without a care for the revelation that Finn is his kid and has come to get him. He even pulls the old going out for milk and cigs trick.
I gotta run to the store!
In the chaos and confusion, Finn has to face off against the Lich while his father makes a getaway. Set up moments before that the blood of the Citadel's guardians has awesome healing capabilities, Finn lucks out and uses it on the Lich. Finn runs after his father once more, only for Martin to cut off the path to his asteroid. Finn, still hanging on, is using all of his strength to not let Martin escape, when the Season 5 Grass Sword Curse plot thread rears its head. For a dozen episodes or so now, Finn has had a magical cursed sword on his arm, and in this moment, responding to his desire, it grows and twists over itself to keep Martin from escaping. But the pull is too much, and the curse pulls Finn's arm off. Whether it's alternate versions, past lives, or his own imagination, many episodes have shown previously how Finn has almost been destined to lose his right arm. They even make the point to show that the Guardian blood won't grow back the arm, only enabling a single flower to emerge where the arm used to be. The episode's end is somber, but not wallowing in the event. The lingering note the episode leaves with is that Finn isn't alone in that moment. Shelby and Jake are there to comfort him. But still, this is a pivotal moment in the show's development. It took so many individual desperate elements and combined them into one climax. Finn's dad, Prismo, the Lich, the Grass Sword Curse, all the previous foreshadowing of Finn's arm. All the while, it still set up stories to follow. Taking place almost exactly at the midpoint of the entire run of the show, everything will be different from now on. Adventure Time, the series itself, doesn't necessarily follow what one would consider a traditional 3-act story structure. Often it will focus more on telling a contained story within an episode, and if there are concepts they would like to expand upon, then they can continue the story in another episode sometime down the line. As a result, it's not really feasible to map the progression as a whole in a structure because the show was not intended to be viewed that way. Cartoons were, and sadly still are, seen as solely children's entertainment. This results in some viewing them as lesser entertainment. Disposable, to be viewed and forgotten, spare the simple concepts and lessons they may teach to a burgeoning youth. This is where 2010's animation really sought to buck this trend, however. Shows at the time saw a fan base of teens and young adults who were still interested in animated programming. Part of the reason why was because a priority for the shows were to include character-focused and serialized plots that audiences could get invested in. Most included the coming-of-age elements, which are extremely common for shows directed at young audiences like these, but each also contained elements unique to them to garner specific crowds and interests. My Little Pony Friendship is Magic would break the traditional stereotypes of the show and redefine the poor writing the series had been known for. Star vs. the Forces of Evil would have a hard focus on teenage romance and magical girl camp. Steven Universe, which many of the crew were alumni from Adventure Time, would tackle identity politics in a vibrant spacefaring coat of paint. Gravity Falls would center itself on an expertly told mystery while also imbuing the show with Pacific Northwestern charm. Even a mini-series like Over the Garden Wall, which had more Adventure Time crew alumni, takes its dark and enchanting atmosphere and recalls fairy tale-esque harvest season imagery to tell a both classic and modern feeling story. Adventure Time itself presents an unstoppable barrage of strangeness and absurdity, and unlike other comparable children's programming, it demands its characters evaluate their place in the universe. In this way, Adventure Time is less of a children's animated program, and more of a work of comic neo-absurdism, which imposes issues of the self onto characters where it sees fit. All this to say, looking past the first blush for this area of animation tells a tale of the level of storytelling maturing, while still maintaining the whimsy and fun that cartoons are known for. The variance of audiences, types of stories being told, and genres being explored, all topics that a newer, older audience is on the lookout for, and that the creatives were keenly aware of because they themselves are part of that target audience. The crew being more aligned to the audience not only made the stories more geared to them, but also made the show itself more responsive to deeper introspection because everyone involved was interested in that. With that context, the story of Adventure Time can now somewhat be charted overall in traditional means. As the show fashions itself traditional D&D fantasy flavoring, so too can typical story elements that are present in those show themselves here as well. When described, these salient elements are known as monomyths. These monomyths come from the larger concept of the hero's journey, which was popularized by the studies of Joseph Campbell. It's not a prescription on how to create a story that most would call well told, but the initial studies came to the belief that many traditional stories shared these elements that created a narrative to satisfy. Other stories that do not fit this mold have been told and are enjoyed, so assuming the only way to tell a story is to follow the journey is plain wrong. This is just spotting trends and using them to explain in a way why we appreciate these tales. Modern stories are far less interested in perfect heroes and the exact alignment with the outline. Even Adventure Time itself is not interested in following that either, to be exact. So why do we bring it up? Because the monomyth elements within the journey are latent within nearly any story you read or watch. However, they need not all be present. One story can be focused on one specific part of it to explore whatever they wish to say within that part. The 6 seasons shares much with the monomythic element known as the atonement with the Father or the Abyss. This isn't new. Adventure Time has parodied and retold other parts of the journey before as one-off episodes and concepts, but for the show's forced foray into a serialized story, they chose to let Finn reckon with his own father and upbringing before leading him into an existential confrontation with his own self and place in the universe. Atonement with the Father is the step on the journey where the hero must confront whatever holds the ultimate power in their life. We went over the initial meeting with the two, but the show leaves the thread hanging for most of the season. Maintaining the previous storytelling sensibilities, the crew follows up on the plotline in their own time. So while the audience waits nearly half of the season to see Martin again, the story focuses on Finn's internal journey. Primarily 2 episodes show where Finn's mind is at right after the events of the Citadel. He starts mainly furious and determined to get revenge against his father. Everything is frustrating him, and all the replacement arms the princesses gave him just aren't working. Jake gives some great brotherly advice to Finn here, telling Finn that there is no way he is just going to bounce back after what they went through, and that he needs to take things slowly and at his own pace. The insight of this initial flower arm is to force Finn to sit with this and internalize the things he is going through. Even when he manifests a magic/psychic arm and builds a tower into space to get back at his dad, none of it works out. He is obsessively focused on a revenge-driven goal that is leading him nowhere, only putting himself and others in danger in the process. He reaches the outer atmosphere and believes his dad picked him up in a spaceship, but this is all a ruse by Princess Bubblegum to show Finn that his goal isn't what he thinks he is. He got a taste of the revenge he wanted, but knew in his heart that it wouldn't relieve any of the negative emotions he's feeling. Despite being without an arm, he's come out of the experience with the tower feeling more whole than before. Both PB and Jake's approach helped in a way, because Jake was right that Finn had to listen to his heart, but PB was also correct in that the way he was going about it was all wrong. Still at his core, Finn is a good kid, but after all that's happened to him, there's no simple way he can move past it. Stripped of a way out, and without a goal, Finn is lost in the darkness.
I'm lost in the darkness, what will this bring? Autumn descends on me, autumn.
This leads to the single most controversial episode in the show, Breezy. How convenient that one of the most discourse-generating episodes is also one of my personal favorites. Breezy is an 11-minute exploration of Finn's depressive episode. Breezy itself is quite a mature episode, more mature than I think audiences were ready for. Not following what one might assume a cartoon's depiction of depression would be, Adventure Time gives a more nuanced portrayal of feeling listless and still functioning apathetically in life. Finn's still hanging out and trying to have fun, but continues not to feel anything. Going around and having sloppy hookups is not going to help Finn in any way. Yet, he continues to be enabled by the princesses and his wingwoman, the titular Breezy. Breezy is selfish in her goals, as she only wants Finn's flower, not interested in the person it's attached to. The episode culminates in Finn spending the night with LSP, and being metaphorically deflowered. Finn's whole situation is not an uncommon one. Many people can feel numb and worthless when in the throes of depression, making choices they regret afterwards, and just floating through life without direction. Laying in the moonlight afterwards, Finn and Breezy sing through their inner turmoil. It's not spelled out, but this and the night with LSP is where Finn realizes his exploits are not healing his inner woes. Ever since his mistakes with Flame Princess, his encounter with his dad, losing his arm, all these events have been crushing Finn with their weight, and as a result, his flower has been wilting this entire time. His road to this point is laden with mistakes, but whose isn't when you are a teen still figuring yourself out in the world? But this is the moment where Finn can see his actions have been distracting him, rather than filling the void in his soul. Rather, he knows that he must choose to accept the issue. This acceptance takes the form of what Finn mainly sees as the most mature person in his life, Princess Bubblegum. She doesn't appear to him because he is in love with her. He has been moved past that for a long time now. But he now sees her as a trusted peer, and someone he can aspire to be like as he is growing up. He is still a hero, and his love for his friends, family, and the world in general is all the guidance he needs in this time and place in his life. This brief moment of self-actualization blooms the flower, which grows into a new arm with a tiny thorn in his palm. The impression of the event is still there, but his arm has been returned. So for a child's cartoon, this episode covers topics like depression, self-worth, virginity and sex, apathy, and does it in a way that is not holding your hand and dressing down every little detail of the plot. It's messy and complex, but so are situations like that in real life. The reception to it online, however, is as mixed as you can get. I can understand the uncomfortability when discussing topics that tend to be quite sensitive, but the discourse I've seen doesn't often make points of merit beyond it makes me uncomfy. There is reason to take issue with Finn getting his arm back so quickly, but with the benefit of hindsight in the whole series, it's not forgotten. The road that arm takes is a whole other story in itself, so the outcome is worth the brief disappointment in this moment. But the narrative has been changing in recent times. I see more people talking with nuance of the episode and how they find it relatable to their own journeys in their youth. This circles back to the journey Finn is going on this season. More than the step in the hero's journey being about fatherly atonement, it is more broadly about being at one-ment with oneself. This episode tackles Finn's id and superego in ways that haven't been challenged before in the show, and now, having come out of the lull with a newfound sense of self, can allow him to face whatever trials his father and the rest of the season will assault him with. Wrapping all those concepts in with the sexuality aspect too was no mistake, as Fraud was the progenitor of all those ideas posed. Framing it in the hero's journey just relates it back to how Finn perceives the events and himself. If he fashions himself as wanting to be a hero, then this is just a step on the path towards being a more awesome person for those around him.
Welcome home, buddy.
This trend is a little infectious because the pathos of reclaiming happiness for oneself is a journey that many characters take in this season. There's an episode about Finn and Jake's oft-forgotten brother Jermaine, where he chooses to no longer fulfill their father's duties and lives on his own accord from now on. Jake has a whole meditative episode showcasing his lackadaisical ways and highlighting how his journey to enlightenment isn't one that can be chased. Alongside that is Princess Bubblegum learning how to no longer be so diligent and allowing herself to chill out. She stops her mass surveillance systems and no longer manipulates her subjects' lives. Part of that is how she is more present in her friends' lives too, helping Finn out and being a more positive influence on him. The third version of Lemongrab gets an episode that allows them to embrace their differences and find fulfillment with themselves rather than seeking it in others. As stated, the season settles itself in its own personal philosophy and provides the characters a sense of absolution. Having the characters be set up through many seasons and episodes, it's only natural to not only develop them further, but also reckon with the traits they already have. Sometimes it takes them into valleys, but that's only to allow them to climb back out a more well-rounded person. Framing these personal journeys are also spiritual odysseys, where the entire world of Adventure Time reckons with mysticism. Obviously, there have been magical wizards and civilizations on Mars set up before, but the plot ties itself directly to a preordained cycle the world goes through. Every 1,000 years, a comet hits the Earth and enacts a great change. This cyclical pattern has come around, and another comet is incoming to Earth at the time of our heroes. Though for the most part, our characters don't interact with the comet itself. Finn is the only one who even knows it's arriving beforehand, but this is because of his connection to it. Many episodes pose philosophical questions. They attempt to have the characters reckon with themselves and their place in the chaotic world. The sixth season highlights this even more by explaining not only the cyclical comic pattern, but also illuminating fundamental aspects of this world too. In the episode Gold Stars, there is a vision of the universe before there was any concepts of time or anything. The lit shows that the bedrock of reality is a writhing mass of monsters that the universe was made from. They don't elaborate more upon the beginnings of that. No demiurge is mentioned that shaped the world. There are, however, still characters that embody these concepts. Grob Gob Glob Grod is a worshipped deity in Oo, commonly taking the place that godly entities occupy in our world. There are 4 elements that always have an avatar to represent them. We see how ancestors of these elements reacted to another Callus comet coming in their time. Seemingly aware of their place in things, the fire, candy, and slime elementals were willing to give up their lives to continue a perpetual cycle. The ice elemental, Evergreen, was not so keen to die and intended to create a wish-granting crown to solve the issue of the comet. His plans failed, but the others were correct that their elements continue to be represented in the modern age of the show. This element of reincarnation has been present in the show for seasons at this point. Previously, Finn has been able to see his past lives through hypnosis, seeing that he was a comet, a butterfly, a glowing ooze, and a ghost lady who has been haunting him in the treehouse. This ghost lady was an individual named Shoko, who was alive recent enough to have had interactions with Princess Bubblegum as she was constructing the Candy Kingdom. The cycle of resurrection is another element that perpetuates this motif of the cyclical nature of the universe. Things happen and change and happen again. Many of these elements are introduced through retroactive continuity. The thought of a retcon can make some audiences bristle, but this happens in nearly every property you consume. Creatives are not able to plot out every little detail when outlining a show's direction, especially with a show as creatively freeing as this one. There is room in the show for not only large cosmic spanning tales, but also personal, introspective stories that a crew member really wanted to tell. The hat trick is making it all feel cohesive through the use of these retcons. A Season 1 episode will introduce this trickster antagonist, Magic Man, who is a one-dimensional villain of the week. Then, someone likes that character, so they bring him back to cause more mischief, only they expand upon who this guy is by connecting him to Mars and his relationship with Glob. And now, by the time they bring him in around Season 6, they have already added story to a character who was initially one-dimensional, so much so that now he is able to serve the stories of others and change the trajectory of his own as well. When introducing the Creeps, the Ghost Lady was just a fun scare for a jovial horror-themed episode. But revisiting her in the vault, Shoko's backstory and putting her spirit at ease are just another showcase how positively retcons can flesh out the world such as this. The crew doesn't have specific outlines, but they know the feeling of when a concept does work for the universe they inhabit. Truly, the artists and writers try to write honest meditations about spiritual, magical, and mystical themes into episodes, while keeping it funny and light enough to balance the heaviness and still be considered an Adventure Time story. Sure, partly in a way they are writing for an older audience, but they still enjoy loading episodes with cosmic bombs to get any kids watching the show to have their minds blown. Often approaching a premise initially with a really serious, heavy insight before tooling it into something funny, this approach was a common one for what an episode should feel like. Usually the setup or act 1 will center the focus of an ep on a singular character, commonly just observing them in their lives. Then the initial major turn arrives, creates the direction for the rest of the episode, giving the main character a goal or having something at stake. Often you want the conflict of the episode to be important to the character who's interacting with it, a matter of life and death, so the audience can be invested and know why the characters are invested as well. Act 2 is where we see the character doing what they know they have to do relating to the plot of the episode. They meet obstacles along the way, but still remaining on the path of the initial goal. The end of Act 2 can have the character be brought down by said obstacles and reach a low. This is where something can spark a new idea or finish a setup earlier into a payoff. The third act is where, if you set Act 1s and 2 up properly, you can really cut loose and have fun. Pay everything off and leave the audience feeling good about what happened, but at the same time not doing exactly what they thought would happen. This is a very basic story structure, and with the avenue of these massive philosophical elements they want to tackle more and more, the stories they are telling are expanding to not be so beholden to a traditional structure. Take Astral Plane as an example. Instead of having the conflict be about diving into a dungeon or fighting monsters, Finn's conflict for the episode is a crisis of the self. He starts the episode seeing the Catalyst comet approaching Earth, and the sight gives him questions about the value of life out there in the cosmos. He then astral projects in his dreams to see the situations of various characters and how they deal with their own issues. All along the way, Finn is considering how often sadness is present in everyone's lives. Yet at the same time, he too sees the birthing of a Lard, which he sees as a beautiful act of creation. The crisis he then is conflicted with is that if being born is the ultimate act of creation, then is everything afterwards just a big waste? Everyone else has problems and sad loneliness to deal with in their lives. This question is what's on his mind as he arrives to Mars and meets with Glob. The whole Martian civilization is preparing for the arrival of a comet, a problem they have never had to deal with before as it has always hit Earth and not Mars. Glob offers an antidote to Finn's crisis. While creation is an immense and powerful act, it is not the pinnacle because to live is to maintain and keep what awesome creations you do create. It is not enough to have just made something, but also to sustain it. This is only one question that one episode poses in a season filled with episodes that relate back to the central, ultimate absurdist experience the world as a whole is. The variety of character journeys in the show can allow for most audience members to identify with a certain process a character is going through and appreciate that other characters are attempting to achieve similar things as well. Like most people, we are all just searching for inner peace in some form, and this 6th season is where this show chooses to allow these issues to come to a head for a number of the characters. The ultimate showcase of this is where the season chooses to end the ongoing personal journey for Finn. This plot gets the most episodes dedicated to it in the season. He meets and comes into contact with his father again as Martin crashes back onto Earth. Said episode highlights the difference between the two, with Martin's continued manipulation of a village of little guys, while Finn maintains his virtuous nature by assisting the village. In Martin's current state, he is nothing but a scoundrel, using everything he can get from everyone around him, with no consideration for how his actions affect others. Ironically, when Finn asks about his birth and abandonment, Martin tells the closest thing to a truth that he can. Yet, when morning comes and the village is in shambles and the ship Martin arrived in is gonna blow, Finn rejects his dad once again and chooses to go save others, reaffirming his heroic morality. By this point in the season, Finn has already been through his bout of anger and has come out the other end of his depressive episode. Ultimately, Finn is at the most whole he has been for a season or two now, not necessarily having processed everything, but he has a much grander outlook on life now, which is why he's able to ask himself and Glob questions without sending him into another spiral. The internal journey for him is completed, so the conflicts surrounding the comment in the finale are not him experiencing change, but instead reaffirming his own personal choices and worth. The season ends with the episode The Comet, the second half of a two-parter that ties all the season threads together into one philosophical odyssey in space. Princess Bubblegum is voted out as ruler of the Candy Kingdom right as the Catalyst Comet approaches Earth. Primordial Monster wants the comet's power for itself, and even Martin returns. It's a big mashup of the biggest elements in the season, all to serve the function of Finn's growth. Strategically, 3 viewpoints emerge in the episode to illuminate which the show ultimately aligns with. The first is offered by Orgulorg, the Lovecraftian monster who emerges from Gunther the Penguin and seeks to capture the Catalyst Comet in the hopes of absorbing its power and knowledge. Orgulorg explains that his view is about crushing anyone who stands between you and your goal. There's a peculiar sort of determinism to his view. He sees the universe as laying out a path, as setting out opportunities, but he views those opportunities as only there to be seized by those who have the will to do so. Another end of that is the ultimate challenge facing Finn when he comes back into contact with his dad, Martin. Finn, previously having dealt with it, is now faced with Martin's ultimate worldview, apathy. A common emotion for one to feel when faced with the overwhelming and absurd challenges that life throws at us. Martin stands for pure self-interest, but not in the same manner as Orgulorg. He says the universe is empty, a void without rules or directives. He uses the moth he is traveling in as a metaphor. Martin explains that the creature is random, that it just goes wherever without any regards to his wants or desires. And that's how he truly views the universe, as chugging along without any chance for him to move or shake it in the slightest, leaving him merely along for the ride. Finn bristles at this viewpoint the most, not just because it is coming from his father, who he has been in conflict with all season, but because it is antithetical to his heroic mindset. The third view is presented by Finn himself. After a season of uncertainty for the series' protagonist, where past events have left Finn struggling to figure out what he should be doing with his life and what his place in the world is, he seems to find some peace in this episode. It's difficult to boil Finn's perspective down to a single thought or idea. Whatever ideas are bound up in his heart, Finn sees a point to it all. He sees a meaning behind the fabric of the stars. Not that everything is an open door, but everything happens for a reason. Doors opening, doors closing, stumbles and falls, and the friends like Jake and Princess Bubblegum who pick you back up. Finn believes that it's all meant to be. In a way, he takes the advice Glob gave him and fights for the world to persist. But the final test for Finn is when he has a choice presented to him by the soul of the comet in the emptiness of space. The comet gives Finn a choice. Finn can go back with the comet to the beginning and the end and leave this existence. Or he can reject that and go back to the world he was living in, the world where he can experience all of those emotions and senses and unwavering, intertwined forces represented in a rainbow of concepts. The comet speaks to Finn and shows him representative images in the rainbow: good, evil, love, hate, friendship, isolation, sadness, madness, loyalty, honor, mothers, fathers, scoundrels. In that moment, Finn confronts what can be considered the ultimate existentialist question: whether to continue existing. Finn struggles for a moment with the choice, but when he reflects on all those facets of the human experience, the harms perpetuated in the name of pure ambition, the greater moments that feel fueled by a higher purpose, the random acts that seem formless and meaningless, he remarks that as a whole, none of it sounds bad.
I feel like I put a lot of work into this meat reality. I'd like to see it through.
Faced with the existential dilemma of continuing to live in the world colored by the shades of humanity in a rainbow, be they good or bad, or leave it all behind, Finn chooses the world he's built. He chooses life. He returns to the multicolored land that has been his home, that is a part of him, and he goes on. In truth, his choice is made before he even gets into the situation. The entire journey leading to this point has been the ultimate reclaiming of Finn's contentment with his life. He loves his friends and family, and has put so much effort and work into his time here. It's not worth the escape, even when presented that not only will everything he likes still be around, but so will his hardships and challenges. In a perfectly simple response, Finn reaffirms the effort he has put in, and desires to see his life through. Finn's ultimate pathos being that, despite it all, life is worth living.
Hey, Finn.
Hey, man. You ready to come home?
That sounds good.
Awesome. See you soon.
Yes.